is up, everyone? It is C.W. Hall, your host here on the Kinetic Innovators Podcast. Charlie Whiskey with you today in studio with Shawn Kumar, founder and CEO of a company called RhythmScience, and we're going to be talking about how they are deploying artificial intelligence to help clinicians and their teams better manage patients who are dealing with heart failure. And if you look around the country, it's a pretty significant illness that we're dealing with, very expensive to manage as well, and challenging for a lot of reasons, affecting over 6 million people right now. They expect that to be over 8 million people by 2030. We're spending somewhere north of $18 billion a year on hospitalizations alone associated with this illness and its management. And I'm very happy to have Shawn with us here in the studio to talk about how they are making it a little bit more efficient for teams to try to manage this complex illness. So Shawn, I thank you for joining me today.
Yeah, thanks for having me, CW. Really appreciate it.
Talk a little bit about the work you all did with Sinai. From what I understand, you did a collaboration on trial there, looking at this as a possible way to help manage these patients, and then we can talk a little bit more about the platform itself and how you're using that as a commercialized product.
Yeah, Sinai was an early customer of ours. We're a broad-based cardiac data platform here for practices to really manage data for both AFib and heart failure. In the course of working with them, there was a mutual interest really in developing more advanced heart failure systems. They in-house developed some clinical decision support AI around heart failure that we thought was really interesting. I've been really interested in the heart failure space since I was at Abbott launching CardioMEMS, an insertable pulmonary arterial pressure device in 2017. But so there's some missing gaps really in that product and a lot of the products that are out there in the market that ostensibly want to make an impact in a population basis. So we got together here and they did some trialing. We're doing some more trialing on what does it look like to operationalize AI here to manage complex patients. And as you know, CW, the heart failure space is incredibly complicated. There's no easy solution to a patient that has heart failure. There's a lot of folks involved in the equation, large care teams, and a lot that's required of the patient here. And so really that's where we think AI can have a big impact in making something that's very complex a lot simpler.
Talking about the complexity, there's 4 classes of medications that we need to try to get a patient on that do a variety of things, each of which has their own challenges as to whether or not, if I'm taking this drug, am I going to tolerate it, particularly when we start combining them together. There's target levels of these drugs, doses that we want to try to get them to as an optimal target. And that process involves looking at a whole bunch of data. How's my cardiac output now? What are my vital signs doing? Am I having side effects when I take these drugs? All of these things, a lot of data collection from devices, from the patient themselves, pharmacists working on this, trying to give their best guidance on, okay, based on this information, we want to adjust these drugs in this way. I can imagine how the support of AI kind of analyzing some of this might be able to streamline that a bit, such that perhaps instead of one person to this many patients being able to do it, since it's so manual on some level, to being able to maybe have a top-down, more population level kind of approach, so I'd be a little bit more efficient trying to manage this, fewer people managing a few more people safely.
Yeah, and I think that's right. I think that's one of the big challenges here. It's almost like you need a little bit of a co-pilot here in navigating through this, because it's a data deluge, right? And the risks are quite high, right? So if we make sense of that data, we can reduce the risk in the decision making and treatment management plans, right? And help us uncover gaps. I mean, the stakes are so high too, right? You get admitted to the hospital for heart failure, the prognosis is not good for you, right? And the likelihood that you end up back in a center or even worse, right? You have a severe adverse event, right? And decompensation are pretty high. And so to me, like, the issue is you really need a large care team to do this, right? And you need a patient completely engaged in this process, and we can't really afford that, right? Here, given the magnitude of this population here, and the fact, as you point out, that's growing. And so I think it's a perfect application of AI and technology systems writ large, right? Even without really saying it has to be a probabilistic AI system. It's a technology. Technology has a lot of impact in this space, and I think for a long time here, the belief was there was some magical device that could solve this, or there's some drug, new drug that comes out, right? The drugs have been fantastic, right, and they keep getting better and better, and yet it doesn't really seem like we've gotten a grip around the problem yet, right? And so here I'm more bullish than I've ever been. Been working in heart failure for a decade now, and I'm more bullish than I've ever been before that AI is going to have a real impact here, and I'm going to make this a not solved problem, but contained problem. And I think that's really the beginning of what really we need to do here for what is running amok here inside of our healthcare system in the U.S.
When you look at artificial intelligence and start talking about it being deployed in the clinical space, where we're making some level of decisions based on what AI has to say to us, talk about that a little bit here. What are we getting from AI as it relates to the management of these patients? We're not talking about just putting it on autopilot and having the machine tell me what to do, but frame it so that if I'm a clinician that's skeptical about AI touching anything to do with trying to manage these AI heart failure patients, what are we talking about?
What we're talking about is think about all the various steps that are required in properly managing these patients, and are there steps here that we can provide help with, right? Can we move the process along? Can we gather the data and information, clean it up, and structure it in a way that actually helps you, right? I think that's what we're talking about in AI. We're not talking about some system here that's going to call a patient and manage them, right? And you're out of the loop, right? I mean, I think that's a great vision, right? For the future. I think we're far away from it here for a lot of reasons. I think we can have AI that helps diagnose heart failure better. Like, you think about the various components of this, right? And diagnosis early is can be a challenge, especially in community settings, right? And things like that, maybe where there are not good heart failure programs out there. So how do you more quickly identify a patient that's at risk for heart failure, right? And there, I don't think anyone feels like that's controversial, right? If you're interested in heart failure at a population level, that doesn't seem to be a concern. Then once the patient is identified as in heart failure, are they being managed appropriately, right? Are there things that could be done based on data that you haven't seen yet, but is in your database, right? And by looking at that data, it can surface to you, here's an opportunity to intervene. Are there additional data that we don't have that we should go get, right? Is that a use for agentic care to go and get data that we need, right? That if we didn't have that AI in place, you would go get it yourself, right? You or your team, right? And there's obviously a lot of problems with that. And then are there sort of irregularities or things like that we want to scan for systematically, right? And that's so when you break it down into the steps involved, right, then it doesn't seem as big of a beast there, right? This isn't plugging in ChatGPT into your EHR and saying like, here's the solution, right? Like, if it were that easy, it would have been done, and it could be done, right? But it's certainly not that easy.
We'll talk about that just a little bit, because I've had a chance to see an early version of the platform, and it's pretty slick in terms of being able to see from a top-down kind of perspective a group of people that each have unique data points, some of which that might be alarming, some of which might be right where we want it, allowing me to really focus my attention on those points that really need some attention now. Kind of describe a little bit about how you make that, present that information to the clinical team, because you're able to take in data points from devices, from EHRs, you said, other sources, and then be able to, use all of that along with the protocol as it's plugged in to give some, you might consider this or possibly that.
Yeah, so and it's evolving, right? Here we've been at this for a long time, and really working with first device-based heart failure systems, looking at irregularities, right, and helping kind of screen out noise and artifact. And now what we're doing with a larger heart failure program system, it's really looking at, what are the medications involved and what should the medications be based on the data that we have. I think sticking to proper and aggressive titration scheduling can be very hard at a programmatic or population level, right? That sequencing is quite an orchestration, right? And so I think that's really where our system will shine here. That will help sort of do this across, let's say, 1,000 or several thousand patients and identify the key ones that you could act on today, right? That would make a meaningful difference. And I just don't know of a way to do that, using our standard methods around this, right? And sort of like
looking in this record, now going to the next patient, and looking in that record, and basically doing a deep chart dive on each one of them.
Maybe you'll get lucky and, maybe you got the visit scheduled that day, or maybe that patient called in, right? If that patient's calling in, it's maybe too late, right? This is all about early action, right? Not about getting a patient to an ER so you can diurese them, right? That's a fail, right? And that's kind of how the current system is built, right? Weight gives you that very low discrimination level, right? So what are the other signals in there, and how do we get them to people at the right time? Right. And that's always been our motto. We've done a lot of work with stroke prevention with, arrhythmia devices and things like that. Right. So it's kind of a similar model in a lot of ways for us here, but on a much more complicated space, given how much more complex this disease is.
Talk a little bit about who should think about deploying RhythmScience for their program. Are we talking about your typical, even independent cardiology office that's got a decent sized patient population of heart failure? Or were you talking more about the heart hospital or system level groups? Who should be thinking about this?
Yeah, I mean, I think anybody can do a heart failure program, right? If there's interest, and obviously you need resourcing to do it. A lot of places already have this resourcing, and they're just not employed effectively, I would argue, right? I think an individual practitioner may not really see the value or signal in this. Some of them do, I mean, I've worked with a lot of doctors over the years, and it's really in that scenario, it's what their personality brings to the table. I don't think there's anything from an infrastructural business model side of this that really should be a barrier this day and age with virtual care and the ability to work with externalized and internalized teams, right? I don't really see any barriers, really. I think bigger programs may have bigger challenges because they have more infrastructure that's hard to move, or systems that are harder to adjust, right? Even though they may have more of a mandate around a population metric, or may have more contracting in place, that benefits them. So I think it's really interest more than anything. Here. And I think that the US system, is really aligning around providing these free-form structures, right? Where you can build whatever kind of program you want to build, right? And now we're moving towards what do the outcomes look like, right? With CMS access. And I think that's very exciting to see that shift happening. And I think that will focus people more, and sort of, but the creative space in this is just wide open right now, right? And you can see these different approaches that we're all taking to the problem, and I think that's actually really exciting.
When you talk about CMS access, the value-based care space, if you're, in cardiology, the requirements for those practice groups to be hitting certain measures and doing, that much better job of getting patients like this on plan and to target is really going to start having some serious impacts on the payments or penalties that they're dealing with. So being able to operationalize some greater levels of efficiency through a tool like this, I can imagine, this is coming down the road starting next year. So to be able to start to have a better view of what your patient population is looking like that are dealing with heart failure, and where they are in the titration process. Are they on plan or not? To the optimal protocols, I think is going to be key in terms of hitting some of those marks that they're going to be required to hit.
I agree. Yeah, I agree, and I think it's a really great direction for us to go in here, and it's going to be a little unsettling in a lot of ways, a bit disruptive, right? And maybe very disruptive, right? And I think that's exciting. I don't really know how to land. It seems like there's a lot of working in place here, right? And stay tuned for the next few months here, and we'll give you an update, right? And I mean, but we've gotten used to that as well. Like the work that we've done here with cardiac devices has also been through a lot of uncertainty from a payer perspective over the years, right? And I think in the ambulatory monitor space, they went through that as well. So I think if you're comfortable being in this space, you have to be comfortable with that like level of uncertainty, right? Especially in digital with service payer models, right? Because it seems like it's just really evolving very, very quickly here. And but I welcome that. And I think we welcome that at RhythmScience because we recognize that there's a lot of limitations to the current system here that are not changing the trajectory of the numbers you described at the top of the podcast, right? And I think it's a combination of where things are evolving from a payer perspective, from an AI perspective, from a device and drug perspective, and who has that holistic view, right, and how all that works together, right? And I don't think I can point to anyone that does, and I think our mission here is to connect some of those threads and build out a system, that can really point to that right direction. And I think it's collaborative. I think there's other companies in this space that have a lot to contribute, and I think we view ourselves as part of that ecosystem. We're a very integrative kind of company, in that regard. And I think that's a fun approach to this.
Obviously, the development of AI, its capabilities, and the opportunity to maybe develop it to do things like coding and different things, it's certainly going quickly, but you guys have been at this now for a minute. This isn't something you guys put together this last year. Talk about where you stand against the entity that's like, we're gonna develop our own AI program for the management of heart failure. I'm sure you probably welcome the challenge. Oh, come on in, the water's fine. It'll take a little while to actually get to where you have an actual deployable platform doing the things you needed to do on a process like heart failure titrations that have so many legs that all must be bearing weight effectively to accomplish the task. It's not just going to be, okay, cool, we're going to tell AI to do this and it's going to put out a little management protocol for it.
Yeah, I'm curious, with these open evidence and these other solutions that people try to apply them here and how that looks, and whether that actually meaningfully solves problems for people. I'm skeptical, with my use of AI to see that without really the proper curation and sort of reps there to actually get this at a usable state as opposed to noise and distraction, just like all the other CDS hooks that we put in over the years that end up being annoying for providers and things like that, right? So I think that it's ownership of really good product that at the end of the day makes a huge difference, and really knowing this problem space well. And I mean, luckily it's such a big problem, and there's so many ways to get into this that like it's gonna we'll be able to sort of entertain a lot of solutions. And so it's obviously really hard to scale these things up. It's hard to get these programs going. There's huge governance and contracting challenges around all of this, right? So I've been in healthcare for a long time. It's a bottomless pit here, right? It's a bottomless pit of problems, and we're incrementally improving it. And I don't see game changers.
So easy.
It should be. Yeah.
In my day job, we've designed our own just documentation platform that lets us do some population level stuff. Not talking about trying to manage something like heart failure and heart failure protocols and data intake and all of that. So it's taken us 6 years to get here. So I'm sure you welcome the opportunity to go up against anybody that's going to try to do it themselves.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, and I think there are a lot of folks interested in the space, and they're coming at it from different angles, and so I think it's great and exciting, and I think it's moving quickly and more quickly than I've seen it move, like let's say 5 years ago, right? So I think you got to be open-minded to how this will evolve here, and we certainly are. And, seeing different approaches is always interesting and enlightening. And the question, how long do these models last, right? Maybe before they were 20 years, maybe now it's 2 years, right? And if that's the case, I think that that's going to be a real challenge for us all to keep up with here, and at the end of the day, these doctors are going to be the ones probably most struggling with this, that are in these clinics. And at some point, I think that they wave their hands and say, just take it away, and manage chronic disease, right? Or we've got a participatory role in this, right? I'm not sure. I think that's an interesting thing to think about.
I think being able to figure out perfect the integration side, obviously that's a big hairy beast, trying to figure out how to plug into all these different data sources, from the electronic record to health information exchanges to wearable devices and all of that kind of thing. To be able to do that effectively may be the thing that gives it a little bit of a longer, pre-obsolescence kind of playing field than just trying to keep up with the rate of AI advancement.
Yeah, I think that's right. Yeah, I think that's right. It's interesting to see what Epic and Cerner will do around these kinds of things as well, right? And if those end up being parity kinds of things here, or sort of like and that's another side of this equation too, right? What are the role of the data warehousing in the longer term opportunities and plays? So yeah.
You have any final thoughts before I let you get back to your day?
I think we're in a really exciting time here with chronic disease care. I think that my belief is that we're going to be developing things here that will actually make a sizable dent here in this problem and contain it from both the cost and human suffering standpoint. So it's super exciting to be in this space and to be talking to other experts like yourself here, and really thinking through this. So I think it's really great and exciting time here, and welcome those to reach out to us who have ideas in this space or opportunities to collaborate. We're always open to that.
I know you're on LinkedIn. Where else can people find you to get more information about RhythmScience and the work you all are doing?
Yeah, our website, rhythm360.io, is a great spot. I'm not super active on the socials, X and Blue Sky, but plan on being a little bit more active here as I free up on some other initiatives. But yeah, I think that's probably the best way.
We're also active on most of the socials where people are hanging out, Facebook, LinkedIn, X, TikTok, YouTube. If you haven't done so already, follow us on LinkedIn, follow us on YouTube. Get to meet people like Shawn here and others that are changing the way that healthcare is delivered and making things happen for the patients out there, maybe saving the industry some spend as well. So it's a pleasure for me to get the chance to highlight some of these folks and the work they're doing. Shawn, I appreciate you making some time today to join us.
Always a pleasure, CW. You do great work here, and I'm really glad to be a part of this.
Well, everybody out there, thank you very much for making us a part of your day today. We look forward to catching up with you in a few days. See you then.